Hi all, our notable game today is the mega high stakes blitz game between Magnus Carlsen and Yangyi in the tiebreak for the Qatar tournament just finished. So Yangyi actually managed to win his last round game against Wesley So joined Magnus Carlsen for a tiebreak match, and according to regulations that's played at 5 minutes each with 3 seconds increments per move. Now financially, the financial implications, I've checked the regulations PDF. The first prize is actually $27,000 and the second prize is actually $16,000. So it's quite a difference in dollars for the mercenaries out there. Probably Magnus doesn't need that much money anyway, he's well off already. But so it's a lot of money at stake for a 5-minute game, or a set of 2 5-minute games rather. So I think this was the first one. Magnus Carlsen was playing white, and I think it's of excellent quality. That's why I'm showing you it. I have actually checked this for accuracy. It's very high accuracy. So let's see what happened. Magnus Carlsen, playing with white, played d4. We saw knight f6, and now a rather turgid looking move, bishop f4. Yes, it looks like a London system construction is on the way, and this is a different move order than from knight f3, of course. So why this move order? It's intriguing. Why not knight f3? But nevertheless, we can transpose. Again, the knight's delayed. We see e3. Now black played e6, and now knight f3. So we're just constructing the London system setup, which is essentially this solid pawn triangle in the center, like a Slav defense in reverse. a6, we see bishop d3, c5, c3. The bishop has got a facility for moving backwards on the event of c4. Black rarely wants to play c4 because it releases the tension in the center, and it makes later an e4 break all the more dangerous. So bishop d6, keeping this tension here. Bishop drops back, welcoming an exchange because the h-file could be quite useful for white dynamically. Black played knight c6, and now we have knight bd2, and here now black castles. We have knight e5, and it seems to be a pleasant version of the London system for white, this position. It seems to me that white has got really what he wanted, that he can later play for f4 and have maybe an e5 bind, but black's next move rather discourages f4 because it seems that the light square grip is quite important here. We see castles, b6, white is not committing yet to f4. Bishop h4 seems to be a rather teasing type of move, threatening to double the pawns of course, but after knight f5, what's the point? Bishop g5. You might find this rather incredible. What is going on here? The bishop has gone like this, and the point is, it seems, well, h6, black is weakening himself now slightly. If black had played bishop e7, then there's knight c6 here, which is annoying. So we see this h6, and the bishop just goes here. So white has teased, Magnus Carlsen has teased the weakness out of black's king side, the h6 weakness. Yeah, if you look at the bishop movements, they're quite incredible here. Bishop g3 to h4 to g5 back to f4. Yeah, creating a weakness. So weakness provocation is a pretty good idea, especially around the king side though. This pawn can never go backwards, never ever go backwards. Bishop b7. Black's light square grip seems impressive though on the e4 square. h3. Bishop e7. a4, trying to discourage b5 from black. Knight d6, and we see that this setup is geared towards e4 control. f3, is Magnus really going to play for e4 now? Knight d7, no, not quite. Queen e2, knight f6. Black seems to be a little bit planless here. Bishop h2, we see queen c8, as though there's an idea potentially of a5 and bishop a6. And we see now rook ac1. And it looks as though with this rook staring the queen that maybe white might be interested potentially in something like c4 or even b4 at some point. We see black playing a5, which looks as though bishop a6 is the intention to try and weaken white on the light squares. Now Magnus plays g4, ignoring bishop a6. Black now does not continue with bishop a6. He plays actually queen d8. If he plays bishop a6, actually there's a problem here technically. White can take on a6, and if, say, rook takes, there's a very strong move in this position. Can you see? If I give you 5 seconds, this is just a variation. What would you play here with white? Okay, knight c6. Yeah, the queen's a bit overloaded. It's threatening knight takes e7. And if, say, here, then we can take on e7 and take on d6. And the same sort of thing with queen takes a6, really. We take here and then knight c6. This is a big problem with this bishop pointing at d6. So black played queen d8, seemingly abandoning this plan. But white's very comfortable now on the queen side. These pawns more fixed than before. Nice battery here, if nothing else, on the queen side. But the queen now pays attention to the g file, to the king. We see knight d7, and now with the pressure released a bit on e4, we see f4 finally committing to f4. Yes, with the temporarily blocked in bishop, but it does mean that g5 becomes possible. Rook c8. Not now though. We see rook ce1, but g5 looks to be completely on the cards. C takes d4, e takes d4, bishop a8. Magnus seems to have a very, very solid position stemming from the London system and aggressive with this g5 now being played in this position. Hg, f takes. And here you might think, okay, what happens on bishop takes? Black played knight takes e5. If he plays bishop takes g5, white has knight takes d7. And again, d6 is loose here. This position is really bad, bishop takes d2, because there's knight f6 check using the pin. And this is the disaster for black, this position. So bishop takes g5, not very good here. So we see knight takes e5, bishop takes e5. And again, black can't take on g5 here, because we just take on d6, trying to distract the queen away from the bishop. And if bishop takes d2, bishop takes f8, threatens mate. And black's just material down here, whole rook down. So yeah, we see black playing knight c4, and Magnus just reinforces both e5 and g5 here with knight f3, and also of course protects this pawn as well. Knight takes, rook takes, bishop d6, rook e2. You see this bishop is really blocked in actually in this structure. And now g6 does seem to be really on the cards. Black stops that with g6. Queen g4, and it looks as though the pawn chain is on the scrutiny here. Here after king g7, it seems technically the engine's like knight h4, with the idea of maybe later rook f6 and sacking somewhere on either on g6, for example, with a knight or the bishop. But we see h4, which might be one of Magnus's inaccurate moves in this game. But nevertheless, in this position, black immediately kind of made a technical error. Now this doesn't look like a major weakness of the last move, moving the rook from f8 to h8. But really the rook's kind of indirectly defending even the f6 square. Some critical squares are indirectly being defended as a weakness of the last move. It's not just f7. And this is demonstrated now in what Magnus plays here. Can you see what white can play here? And it's a very, very strong idea. If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, you might want to pause the video. Rook takes e6, yes. Wow, you might think, what? it's completely undermining the pawn chain, potentially. After f takes, queen takes, white is threatening queen takes g6 with a quick execution after, with the knight e5 check. And black has very limited options here. Before, when the rook was an f8, black could have considered maybe something like queen e8. But here it's not possible because f6 has been left uncovered. You see that? You can see that the weakness of the last move that I mentioned is evident. That the queen e8 resource, you know, we've got queen f6 after, maybe taking on d6 as well. So we see it being played though, queen e8. That's actually what was played here. I mean, it's very limited defensive resources. But yeah, queen takes d6 now threatens things like queen f6. So we see rook c6 trying to defend that. But the damage has really been done in this position. It's the whole of the f file is vulnerable off that rook movement. We see Magnus playing check after takes. Knight takes e5, hitting the rook and threatening rook f7 check. It's a very, very dangerous position here indeed. Black played now rook takes h4, and we see a rook crashing down to the 7th rank. And although Magnus is the exchange down, this knight is absolutely stunning. So white is threatening to win both pieces with rook takes and the knight takes here. The rook defends, but now bishop takes g6, and we have basically 1, 2, 3, 4 attacking pieces heading to black's king now in this position, with this bishop absolutely seemingly useless here. It tries to wriggle out, maybe bishop c6, too little, too late, bishop f7 check, and it's just hopeless here. If king g7, for example, bishop e6 check looks at the rook, we see king f8, and now just knight g6 check, which is picking up the rook. Yeah, it's an absolutely phenomenal position. Anyway, white's winning on material now as well. So black resigned here. So at move 42, black resigned. I thought this was very interesting, and actually I engine checked this game. Very high accuracy from white, average 20 centiball loss only. And it shows how the London system can be really a very, very aggressive weapon of choice depending on the follow-up. So the follow-up actually not playing for e4 but playing, you know, g4, g5. It looks like caveman style, and the rook sacrifice shattering the pawn structure around black's king. The exchange sacrifice lets white's pieces all flood through, with the bishop on a8 being a spectator piece. There really there's no defense to it. So a very impressive attack by Magnus Carlsen in this very, very important blitz chess game. Worth a significant amount of dollars though. If this really is the tiebreak game to decide between first and second, not 100% sure it is, but if it is, then we're talking about the difference between $27,000 and $16,000. But there was another game to come after, which I'll show you on a separate video. So I hope you got something from this one so far. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.